The sky above Crimson Peak burned with the color of dried blood. Thick clouds rolled across the alien horizon, each streak lit by flashes of violent lightning that never touched the ground. The mountain itself rose like a broken fang from the earth, black stone streaked with glowing veins of mineral fire. Nothing about the place felt alive, yet life was here. Predators watched from the ridges, their eyes glowing faintly in the twilight. Somewhere deep inside that maze of rock and shadow, prey was being released. And tonight the prey was human. Ethan Valen staggered out of the holding cage as the gates hissed open behind him. His lungs filled with the thin, acrid air, making his throat burn. He coughed, clutching his side where a half-healed scar stretched across his ribs. The guards, hulking crimson-scaled hunters of the Corvathi clan, shoved him forward with the butts of their rifles. Their armor gleamed like molten iron, each plate carved with runes of conquest. "Run, human," one of them growled in accented trade tongue, voice dripping with contempt. "The hunt begins." Ethan spat on the dirt. His saliva came up pink from blood. "You'll have to work harder than that to kill me." The guard only laughed, a low, rumbling sound that echoed in the storm. Behind the gates, another cage rattled. A second figure was pushed out, smaller, limping badly. Ethan turned his head and blinked through the dust. The newcomer was not human. She was tall, with skin the pale silver of moonlight and eyes the color of liquid gold. Her features were sharp, angular, beautiful in a way that carried an edge of alien danger. Shackles clung to her wrists, sparking faintly with suppression fields. Her breathing was ragged, but she walked with dignity. Ozarathi. Ethan had heard of them, an old race nearly wiped out during the Corvathi Wars. They were rumored to be scholars, builders, not warriors. Seeing one alive was rare. Seeing one as prey in the hunt, that was a death sentence. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Hers were calm, steady, even as the storm raged above. She tilted her head slightly, acknowledging him, then looked forward again. The hunters howled, a chorus of guttural war cries. Drums began to pound in the distance, the signal that the hunt had officially begun. Ethan felt the instinctive chill crawl down his spine. The drums meant only one thing. Somewhere in the darkness, the hunters had already been released. They would come for him, for both of them. He glanced at the Zorathi. "You know what's coming." Yes, her voice was soft but carried a weight that cut through the thunder. "Death, unless we move." Ethan smirked grimly. "Then let's move." They ran. The ground of Crimson Peak was treacherous. Jagged shards of obsidian jutted from the dirt, slicing at boots and flesh. Rivers of molten rock snaked between the stones, their heat scalding from even a meter away. The air was full of metallic ash that coated the tongue and stung the eyes. Ethan led the way, scanning for cover. Years ago, he had been a field engineer in the frontier wars. He wasn't a soldier in the sense of guns and glory. He had been the man who kept reactors running, patched holes in life support, and welded ships together while alarms screamed around him. But war had taught him survival, how to read terrain, how to improvise with nothing. The Zorathi kept pace despite her limp, her long stride efficient, precise. She didn't waste energy. She didn't complain. She simply ran, eyes flicking constantly to the shadows. Above them a horn sounded, low, resonant like the roar of something titanic, the first signal of the hunt. "They're coming," Ethan muttered. "Yes." They ducked into a cleft of rock, both panting. Ethan pressed his back against the stone, his chest heaving. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a jagged shard of metal he'd stolen from the cage floor earlier, crude but sharp enough to cut. The Zorathi watched him. "That won't save you." "Maybe not," Ethan said, forcing a grin, "but I'll feel better holding it." For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by distant thunder and the hiss of molten rivers. Finally, Ethan asked, "What's your name?" "Lyra," she said simply. "Ethan." She nodded as though committing it to memory, then her golden eyes fixed on him sharply. "You are human. Why are you here?" Ethan barked a humorless laugh. "Bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time. Corvathi patrol caught me scavenging a wreck. Didn't even bother with a trial, just threw me in the cage. You." Her jaw tightened. "I was taken from my homeworld. They call me defective." "Defective?" "My people are dead. My clan is ash. The Corvathi keep me alive because I understand machines they do not." Her eyes flickered unreadable. "But tonight they no longer need me." Ethan studied her, realizing what she implied. A discarded tool, thrown into the hunt when her usefulness expired. He knew that feeling all too well. Another horn blared, closer this time. Echoes bounced between the stone ridges. Ethan's gut tightened. "All right," he said, pushing away from the wall. "We're not dying out here, not like this. If we're smart, if we work together, maybe we have a chance." Her gaze lingered on him, searching. At last she inclined her head. "Then lead, human." Hours blurred into a haze of running, hiding, scrambling over razor-edged rocks. Twice they heard the hunters, guttural laughs echoing in the canyons. Once so close Ethan could smell the stench of their armor, burnt oil and blood. They found shelter beneath an overhanging cliff where the ground had collapsed, forming a shallow cave. Inside, Ethan collapsed against the stone, chest burning, throat raw. Lyra lowered herself carefully, wincing as she favored her left leg. "You're hurt," Ethan said. "It is nothing." "Looks like more than nothing." He crouched, pulling a strip of cloth from his sleeve. "Let me see." She stiffened but allowed it. He examined the gash along her calf, deep and raw, probably from obsidian shards. He bound it tightly, the way he'd done 100 times for soldiers bleeding in the dust. "You heal like a human?" he asked. "Slower," she admitted, "but strong." "Then don't waste your strength on pride. We'll need it." Her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile, there and gone again. Outside, the drums began again, slow, rhythmic, mocking. The hunters were drawing nearer. Ethan gritted his teeth. "We can't just keep running. They'll corner us eventually. We need an edge." "You have one." "Not yet," he gestured to the rocks. "But if this mountain is half as unstable as it looks, maybe we can use that." Lyra tilted her head, studying him. "You would fight the Corvathi with stone." "Stone, steel, spit, whatever I've got," Ethan muttered. "That's what humans do." For the first time, real amusement flickered in her eyes. "Perhaps that is why your kind survives when others do not." A sudden sound froze them both, the crunch of heavy boots on stone just outside the cave. Shadows fell across the entrance. Ethan's grip tightened on the shard of metal, his heart hammered. The first Corvathi stepped into view, towering nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled armor glinting red in the firelight. His face was a grotesque mask of tusks and bone ridges, his 4 eyes gleaming with cruel hunger. Behind him, 2 more emerged, weapons gleaming. The lead hunter grinned, jagged teeth flashing. "Run, human," he rumbled. "Run." Ethan's stomach dropped. They weren't hiding anymore, they were cornered. The lead Corvathi filled the cave mouth with his armor and hate. Red glow slid along his tusks. The 2 behind him spread out, rifles low, confident. They enjoyed this part, the corner, the fear, the first spark of panic in a prey's eyes. Ethan felt the cave breathe around him. Hot air pulsed from a fissure in the back wall, grit sifted down from hairline cracks that spidered across the ceiling. The stone above their heads looked like frozen waves, thin layers of glassy rock with darker seams between them, thermal stressed, brittle. He leaned close to Lyra. "See the ceiling? It's ready to fall." Her golden eyes flicked up once. "Resonant layers," she whispered. "Basalt over obsidian, the right note." "And it comes down." The lead hunter took another step, tusks splitting into a grin. "Run, human," he purred, savoring the ritual words. "Run, and we will make a sport of it. Kneel, and I will grant you a clean end." Ethan heard the drums outside, steady and slow. He forced a smile he didn't feel. "I don't do kneeling." He palmed the jagged metal shard, then, reckless on purpose, stepped forward as if accepting the Corvathi's terms. The hunter's 4 eyes brightened. He lifted his rifle a fraction, savoring the moment. Ethan hurled the shard, not at the hunter but up, at a thin pillar of fused stone near the ceiling. The shard rang against it with a high, bright note. The Corvathi laughed, missed. Lyra moved. She pivoted her tall frame and slammed both suppression shackles against the same pillar. The bands hummed in a narrow, angry pitch. The stone sang, dust sifted. A crack raced like lightning. Again, Ethan barked. She struck once more, arms like hammers, shackles shrieking against glassy rock. The pillar's tone jumped an octave. The ceiling above it trembled, lines spreading fast, fast. The lead hunter's smile died. Back. He leaped, but too late. The cave roof let go with a roar. Sheets of obsidian shattered. Slabs of basalt came down like guillotines. The front Corvathi screamed and disappeared under a black avalanche. The second dove right and was buried up to his chest, armor buckling. The third stumbled and fell, pinned by a slab across his legs. Dust turned the world gray. Move! Ethan seized Lyra's wrist and hauled her toward the only dark space that hadn't collapsed, the narrow fissure at the rear where hot air pulsed. He dropped onto his side and wriggled through, the rock scraping his ribs. Heat licked his face. Lyra followed, exhaling once to fit her shoulders through the tightest pinch. Behind them, the pinned hunter howled and fired blind. Sizzling bolts smashed the fallen slabs, showering sparks down the tunnel. The fissure sloped upward and right, widening by degrees into a cramped throat of stone. Ethan crawled until the heat dropped from blister to bearable and the air smelled less of ash. He rolled onto his back, gulping breath, listening, shots, a choked curse in the Corvathi tongue, a distant rumble as more rock shifted. No pursuit, not yet. Lyra lifted her hands. The shackle's emitters were scorched, hairline cracks glowing dull orange. She flexed her fingers once. Risky, she said. Effective. I aim to please, Ethan rasped. His throat burned. He took a careful sip of the cave's thin air. That note, you heard it. I learned to listen, machines, stone, people. She looked past him into the dark. This way goes to the outer slope. Then that's our way. They crawled until the fissure opened to night and the skies dull red. The world outside felt larger and crueler than before, black ridges and molten veins and the mountain's endless twisted steps. Wind dragged ash across the slope in low, hissing waves. Far below, red fireworks popped and bloomed above a distant basin. Cheers followed, thin but unmistakable. Ethan squinted. What is that? Crimson Hall, Lyra's voice flattened. The amphitheater where Corvathi nobles watch the hunt. Sound travels up the chimneys. They celebrate fresh kills. Of us, Ethan said softly. Of anyone. A soft whir rose above them. A black shape drifted from the smoke, a disk the size of a plate with 3 twitching veins and a single lens that glowed red like an eye. It hovered with insect patience, panning, then centered on their faces. A watcher drone. Lyra went very still. The drone clicked and Ethan felt rather than heard a low ping ripple the air. A beacon call. It had tagged them. Down, he snapped, angling so the ridge broke the drone's sightline. Can you jam it? Not with bare hands. Then with those, he nodded at her shackles. Lyra turned her wrists, studying the tiny vents along each shackle's rim. They emit a directional field to numb muscle and dull nerve signals. If I reverse them, they could generate a spike. You can reverse them. A flicker anger maybe passed behind her eyes. They kept me for the same reason they hunt me. I understand things they don't. Ethan crouched close to the stone for cover. Tell me what to do. Bridge the field ports, she said. Metal across both bands, but only for a breath or the feedback will cook my hands. She met his eyes. You trust me. Only one of us crawled a mountain with me while rocks fell, he said. So yes. She exhaled once and lifted her bound wrists. Ethan pulled his shirt seam free, revealing the thin steel seam staples he'd stitched there days ago. He mouthed a thank you to every habit of panic prep he'd learned in the war, then pried one staple loose and bent it into a U on 3. He said softly. 1, 2, 3. He jammed the staple across both shackles' slotted vents. The band screamed. Lyra grunted, eyes clenched. A blue-white arc snapped between her wrists, then leaped skyward like a whip. It cracked through the watcher's body with a flat, ugly pop. The drone tumbled, smoked, and hit the stone with a clatter. Lyra sagged, the shackle's inner edges smoked. Ethan ripped the staple clear. Hands. She flexed them slowly, numb, not ruined. Footsteps clanked on the slope above. Heavy, measured, armored. Ethan grabbed the dead drone and yanked its belly open with his shard. Inside, a lemon-sized power cell, a thin coil, and a slate of glimmering chips. What are you doing? Lyra whispered. Making a liar out of that ping, he said. He snapped the coil free, spliced 2 leads from the cell with trembling fingers, and jammed the coil around a fist-sized stone. He thumbed the cell and the coil hummed. He tucked the assembly tight beneath an overhang to his left. A second later, faint clicks bloomed from the coil like tiny heartbeats. Decoy, Lyra guessed. Trackers love pings, Ethan said. Let's give them a loud one there while we go over there. They slid along the slope in a low crawl, keeping the ridge between themselves and the armor clank. When the Corvathi crested, the decoy's false pulse drew their lenses like moths to heat. One hunter barked. All 3 veered toward the hum. Ethan and Lyra ghosted the other way, breath tight, muscles screaming. When they were a canyon's length down, Ethan killed the power cell with a squeezed wire taut in his palm. The decoy went silent. He let the dead lead fall and kept moving. Crimson Peak rose in layers, a broken stair of black plates and slaggy lips and knife-backed ridges. Rivers of lava wound down like torn veins. The path ahead narrowed into a ravine lined with glassy tubes, each the width of a tree trunk. Wind moaned through them, warping the sound into a chorus of thin, sad flutes. "Organ pipes," Ethan said, awed despite himself. "Basalt columns hollowed by steam." "Do not whistle back," Lyra murmured. "The Corvathi use sound to map prey." He shut his mouth. They moved between the pipes, careful not to touch the fragile edges. The ravine spilled them onto a ledge where the mountain's skin had split to reveal a burning gash, the Ember Chasm. It was 20 meters across and unspeakably deep. Heat surged from it in waves, carrying the stink of metal and bitter rock. On the far side, a crooked path climbed toward the ridge like a black spine. Ethan stared into the chasm's glow. "We're not jumping that." "No," Lyra pointed with her chin. "Glassvein." He followed her gaze. Pale threads grew along the ledge, anchored in cracks, plants that weren't plants, more like mineral fibers extruded by slow heat and rare air. He tugged one. It was flexible, tough, surprisingly cool. "How strong?" he asked. "If braided strong enough," Lyra said. "Zarathi used it to lower furnaces." Ethan's hands moved. He stripped lengths of glassvein, braided 3 into a cord, then 3 cords into a rope, spitting on fingers gone paper cut raw. It was sloppy work in bad light, but his hands remembered 1,000 tight knots from 1,000 worse days. "We need an anchor," he said. He held up the jagged shard. "1 piton coming up." "How do you set it in glass?" Lyra asked. "Not glass," Ethan said. He stripped wire from the dead drone, looped it around the shard, and cradled the drone's power cell under his shirt to warm it with his skin. "Heat, then press. Basalt will bite." He licked his dry lips, touched the cell to the shard, and thumbed it alive. The shard's tip glowed dull red. He set it in a hairline crack, hammered with a rock. The tip sank a centimeter with a squeal. "Good bite," he said, throat raw. They tied in. Lyra insisted she go first. "I am heavier," she said simply. "If it holds me, it holds you." "Fair," Ethan said, because there was no time for pride. She swung out over a glowing gorge that could swallow a ship and put her feet on the far wall. Her tall, lean mass moved with slow control. Halfway, the rope creaked and the piton sang. "Don't bounce," Ethan breathed. Her eyes flicked once, amused. "I do not bounce." She reached the far side and braced, arms bulged, rope across her palms. Ethan took 2 breaths and stepped into heat. His skin felt like paper. His eyes ran. The rope hummed. He moved hand over hand until his boots found stone. They scrambled to safety and collapsed together, backs to black rock, chest to chest with the mountain's slow heart. For 10 long breaths, neither moved. A low growl rolled across the ridge. "Not thunder." Lyra lifted her head. "Trackers." They came at a sprint, beasts built like starving crocodiles with long, taloned feet and muzzles lined with sickle teeth. Metal rings clinked where their ridges met flesh. Harnesses glowed faintly along their spines. The Corvathi rode behind them, rifles up. "Go," Ethan said, staggering to his feet. "Mask our trail." "There," Lyra said, pointing to a shallow basin off the path where pale domes squatted like eggs, each marbled with red veins. "Burst fungus, spores blind, but it needs spark." "Spark we have," Ethan said, and for the first time was glad the shackles still hummed. He tore a sleeve free, wrapped 2 domes in the cloth, and tucked a third under his arm. "Run to that notch," he told Lyra, indicating a narrow turn between 2 boulders. "On my shout, drop." They ran. The trackers shrieked as their riders urged them faster. Claws tore stone. Ethan and Lyra dove into the notch and flattened against the inner wall. The first tracker skidded in, jaws open. "Now," Ethan hissed. He slammed his shackles against the fungus and the wall. The band sparked. The dome split. A white cloud exploded into the notch and poured out in a roiling wave. The first tracker screamed and tumbled, raking its eyes with hooked feet. The second crashed into it. The third reared away and its rider fired blind. The bolt shattered rock above Ethan's head. He grabbed Lyra's arm and ran through the edge of the cloud, eyes squeezed shut, breath held until fire knifed his lungs. They burst into clearer air, half-blind, coughing. Behind, the Corvathi cursed and gagged as beasts thrashed. They didn't stop. The path widened to a shoulder where the wind peeled ash away and the world opened in a dizzy drop. Above, the ridge sharpened into a ragged saw. Ethan wanted to fold in half and vomit. He kept moving. They reached Knife Ridge just as a bright sound cut through the wind like a blade, a high, clean horn unlike the drum's dull thunder. Torches bloomed along the summit line. No, not torches. Hollow banners, their light liquefying the ash. A voice spoke over them, smooth and human, amplified by hidden speakers in the rock. Ethan Valen. Ethan stopped so abruptly Lyra almost ran into him. He knew that voice. It carried the lazy smile he had hated the first time he heard it, years before in a war tent stinking of printer ink and sweat. Ethan, the voice repeated casual. If you're hearing this, congratulations, few make it this far without help. A figure stepped from the heat haze on the ridge and resolved into a man in dark field armor that matched no Corvathi make. The plates were human, the fit was human. The posture, balanced, hands open, was ex-military. His hair was steel gray now, the scar across his lip had faded to a pale rope, but the eyes were the same cool slate. Cashin Rill, warden of the Crimson Peak Hunts, once Captain Rill of Logistics, 7th Frontier Brigade, the man who had taught young engineers like Ethan to cut corners and win ugly. The man Ethan had reported, naively, publicly, when the cuts became sabotage. Rill smiled down the slope as if greeting an old friend at a cafe. You've made a mess, Ethan. Collapsing caves, blinding my beasts. Clever. Ethan's hands curled into fists. You. Me, Rill inclined his head slightly toward Lyra. And you brought a Zarathi, rare game, rare talent. Lyra's face emptied of emotion. He is with them, she said flatly. Warden, Rill corrected, amused. Titles matter on this mountain. The hollow banners rippled. Rill spread his hands. Here is your offer, Ethan, like old times, yes? You were always a useful man when you weren't trying to be a hero. Leave the alien where she stands and walk to me. I will mark you as turned quarry. The hunters will not kill you. You will work for me instead. Salvage. Installs. Clean. Safe. No, Ethan said. Think before you posture. Rill's voice warmed the way a python might warm before a swallow. You can't outrun a clan, you can't outfight a tradition older than humanity's cities, but you can survive. You always were good at surviving. Ethan felt Lyra look at him. He didn't take his eyes off Rill. He lies, she said. They all do. Oh, I don't lie, Rill said lightly. I edit. His gaze sharpened. Proof, then, something to help you decide. He lifted one hand. The shackles on Lyra's wrists chimed once like crystal. The cracks along their rims brightened. Ethan's stomach dropped. What did you? Fail safe, Rill said, teeth very white. In case our alien asset tried to run, you didn't think I would let raw talent stroll off my mountain? I press here. He tapped a wrist control, and the bands become very hot, then very final. Lyra's breath hitched as the metal grew warm against her skin. Rill raised an eyebrow. Run, human, he said again, softly this time just for Ethan. Or watch her burn. The shackles' glow jumped from orange to hungry red. They began to tick. 1, 2, 3. The glow crawled up Lyra's silver wrists like molten veins. Her jaw clenched, but she made no sound. The shackles ticked faster, a countdown hidden inside their alloy. Ethan's gut twisted. He knew sabotage tech when he saw it. Rill had built them to terrify, to break spirit before they broke flesh. And Rill was smiling, always smiling, as though this was just another field test with some disposable recruits. Stop it, Ethan roared, stepping forward. Rill cocked his head. Then step to me, old friend, walk away from her and I'll disarm them. You'll live, she'll die, but at least you'll live. Lyra's eyes locked on Ethan. Calm, gold, no pleading. Do not, they said without words, do not bend to him. The ticking grew shrill. The metal burned hotter, scorching skin. Smoke rose from her wrists. Ethan's hands shook. He thought of the war, Rill laughing at night over rigged supply ledgers, Rill cutting oxygen filters to shave transport weight, Rill shrugging when whole squads choked in thin air. And he thought of the tribunal, how they had stripped Ethan of rank for disruption while Rill slid away untouched, already a whisper in corporate ears. Not again, never again. Ethan tore the dead drone's power cell from his belt pouch. Lyra, hold them out. She obeyed without flinch. Ethan jammed the cracked cell against both shackles and thumbed its last reserves. The bands shrieked, arcs clawing between their vents. Sparks tore across Lyra's skin. She gasped, body stiffening. Ethan held it there, teeth clenched, until the cell burst in his hand with a sharp pop. Silence, smoke drifted. The shackles hung open, circuits fried, their red glow gone. Charred skin ringed her wrists, but she was free. Rill's smile faltered, just for an instant. "You always were inconvenient," he said softly. Lyra sagged, catching herself against the rock. She flexed her fingers once, then lifted her head. "He underestimates you." "Everyone does," Ethan muttered. Above, horns wailed. Korvathi war calls. Shapes moved along the ridge, more hunters, their armor glowing in the banner's light. Dozens. The mountain itself seemed to bristle with them. Rill spread his hands again, voice magnified by hidden speakers. "Impressive, but pointless. Every path down this mountain is mine, every cave, every slope. You are already surrounded." Ethan dragged air into his lungs, brain racing. "We can't outrun them. We can't outfight them, but maybe outthink them." He grabbed Lyra's arm. "We move now." They bolted sideways along the shoulder, the hunters shouting above. Plasma bolts lanced down, scorching the rock. One blast turned a glass-veined rope into vapor, the stench bitter in the wind. The ridge split ahead into a narrow gulch, its walls glittering with crystals that caught the red lightning overhead. Ethan and Lyra plunged inside, breath ragged, shadows snapping around them. The gulch twisted, deeper, darker, until sound itself seemed to warp. Lyra slowed, hand brushing the crystals. "Resonance caverns," she whispered. "The stone here remembers sound." "Good," Ethan rasped. "We'll make it remember theirs." They pressed on until the gulch widened into a cavern. Tall columns rose like black organ pipes, each rimmed with crystal teeth. When the wind blew, they thrummed deep and low. Ethan crouched, scanning. His eyes fell on a cluster of loose boulders perched high against one wall. His engineer's mind drew the lines instantly. If they could collapse that shelf at the right time. "Trap," he said. "We'll bait them here." Lyra nodded once. Her wrists were raw and blistered, but her face was steady. "How?" Ethan grinned grimly. "By letting them hear what they want." He picked up 2 crystal shards and struck them together. The cavern bloomed with sound, a ringing that seemed to multiply, echoing 100-fold, bouncing from wall to wall until it sounded like a small army moving in the dark. The hunters outside shouted, their footsteps rushing closer. Ethan tossed one shard to Lyra. "When they enter, strike high, follow my lead." The first Korvathi stormed in, tusks gleaming, rifle raised. He froze as the cavern sang back at him, hundreds of phantom echoes. The second and third pushed in behind, scanning wildly. More followed, their voices sharp with confusion. Ethan banged his shard hard against a column. The whole chamber shuddered. Cracks spidered across the loose boulders overhead. "Now," he shouted. Lyra struck with both hands. The resonance jumped, a shrieking chorus that tore through the cavern like a living storm. The crystal shelf shattered, boulders cascading down in a thunderous avalanche. The first wave of hunters screamed as tons of stone crushed them. Their rifles fired wild, bolts scorching ceilings and walls, ricocheting in mad angles. One blast slammed into a crystal pillar. The pillar shattered, then sang. The note was so deep it rattled teeth. The entire cavern trembled. Cracks ripped along the floor. Crystals wailed, joining in the vibration. Dust rained. "Too much," Lyra hissed. "You've woken the whole chamber." The hunters scrambled back toward the gulch mouth, but it was too late. Columns toppled, walls caved, the mountain itself roaring in anger. Ethan grabbed Lyra's wrist and yanked her toward a side passage just as the cavern collapsed in a scream of rock and crystal. They ran blind through the tunnel, chased by thunder and choking dust. At last the ground leveled, opening into a ledge halfway down the mountain. Behind them, the gulch was gone, sealed under a mountain's worth of rubble. Ethan bent double, coughing, lungs on fire. "That buys us time." "Not much," Lyra said. Her voice was hoarse, but her eyes burned bright. "The warden will not stop." As if summoned, a sharp crack split the air above. A sleek silhouette descended through the storm, black hull, predatory lines, engines howling. Floodlights bathed the ledge in harsh white. "A ship." Rill's voice poured from its speakers, smooth as ever. "Run, human, run. You've made this entertaining, but the peak always wins." The ship's belly opened, and rows of cages, each filled with writhing figures, lowered on steel cables. Not animals, not prey beasts. Humans. Dozens of them, starved, broken, their eyes wide with terror as they saw the ledge. Ethan froze, bile rising in his throat. His mind reeled, refusing to believe. More like him. Not just scavengers caught by chance, whole shipments of them dragged here for the hunt. Lyra's face hardened. He hunts your people. The cages clanged into place on the stone. Their locks hissed open. And the humans inside were shoved forward, trembling into the storm. Hunters would not need to chase Ethan and Lyra alone anymore. They would drown them in prey. The cages hit the ledge with a metallic thunder. Locks hissed, doors snapped open. Pale shapes stumbled out, men and women with bruised faces and hollow eyes, some barefoot, some clutching each other like shipwreck survivors. A child cried once, a small, thin sound, then bit it off as a hunter's horn wailed above. Ethan's chest went cold. He wanted to rage, there wasn't time. He climbed a broken boulder so the whole ledge could see him. "Listen up," he shouted, voice cracking the wind. "My name is Ethan Valen. If you want to live, look at me now." Heads turned. Fear made their movements slow and stiff. Lyra stepped to his side, tall, silver-skinned, wrists blistered but steady. A whisper of alarm ran through the captives at the sight of her. Ethan raised both hands. "She is with me," he said. "Her name is Lyra. Without her, I'd be a scorch mark. You follow my voice and her hands or you die. That's the choice." Another horn, closer. Above them, Corvathi shapes lined the ridge, armor glowing red like coals pulled from a furnace. Rill's black ship hovered in the storm like a watching hawk. Ethan forced a breath into his tight lungs. "I'm ex-engineer," he said, loud and simple. "Frontier wars, that means I fix things under fire. Right now, that thing is you." He pointed to a jagged notch in the ledge wall, a shadowed cut leading down and left. "We move through there. Nobody runs alone. We stay tight, quiet, low. If you can carry, you carry. If you can't, you hold on to someone who can." A big man near the cages nodded once. His face was all stubble and scars, his shoulders wide under a ripped work jacket. "Name, Cade," he said, voice rough. "I can lift." "Good," Ethan said. He pointed to a thin woman with steady hands who was already tearing her shirt into strips for bandages. "You." "Sierra," she said, meeting his eyes. "Medtech." "Watch the weak, keep them moving." He swept the group with his gaze, counting children 3. One child clung to a teenage girl's leg like a limpet. "You, with the braid, what's your name?" "Lena," she said, chin up despite the tremble in her mouth. "This is my brother." "Stay with me," Ethan said. "Never let go of my belt, not ever." He jumped down. "Everyone tear the cages apart. We need panels for shields, bars for batons, chains for rope." They moved, and moving sparked something like hope. Hands found purpose. Hinges screamed. Bars screeched. Cade ripped a door clean off and held it up like a metal slab. Others followed his lead. In a minute, the ledge swarmed with makeshift gear. Lyra crouched by a lock control ripped from a cage. A capacitor the size of a thumb gleamed inside, still humming with charge. She plucked 2 out, then 2 more. "Flash burst," she said to Ethan, quick and quiet. "We bind a crystal to each and shatter the crystal with the surge, bright, loud, a breath of blindness." Ethan grabbed the handful. "Do it." She wrapped each capacitor with a strip of cloth, laced a shard of the ledge's glittering crystal against it, and pinned the sandwich with bent cage wire. "Press the wire ends together to fire," she said. "Hold in cloth, look away." Ethan shoved 2 into his pocket and passed the others to Sierra and Cade. "Slingers," he said, pointing to 3 able-bodied captives with good eyes. "You'll throw these when I shout, son. Only on son. Understood." They nodded, answers tight. A crack of plasma seared the air. A bolt scorched the stone inches from Ethan's boot and sprayed glass chips like needles. He didn't flinch. "Shields up," he shouted. "Panels forward, tilt to deflect, not block. Keep your eyes on your feet." They formed a ragged, tight block. Cade and 2 others in front with panels, Sierra and the injured in the middle, slingers tucked shoulder to shoulder, Lena and her brother wedged near Ethan's back. Lyra took the rear, eyes everywhere. "Move," Ethan snapped, and they moved. The notch funneled wind and ash into a constant hiss. Rock underfoot turned treacherous, crumbly scoria that rolled like ball bearings, slick plates of black glass, sudden knife ridges that sliced thin shoes and thinner skin. Above, the ship's floodlights swung, hunting for shapes. Ethan led them around a bulge in the wall, using the rock to break the light line. The first trackers shrieked from the ridge. "Faster," Ethan said, breath even, voice level. "One more turn and we get cover." A basin opened to their left, a shallow bowl dotted with pale, marbled domes veined in red, burst fungus like the ones that had saved them before. The trackers poured over the rim of the notch behind, 3, then 6, then 10, long talons clicking, harnesses glowing faint. riders hunched low behind bony ridges. Down, Ethan barked. The front line dropped their panels and knelt, angling the metal sheets to make a crude wall. The slingers crouched behind them. Lyra dropped flat, one hand already on a fungus dome. "Son," Ethan shouted. The slingers pressed wire ends. 4 flash bursts popped at once. The crystals shrieked, light punched the world white. The fungus dome split and exhaled, spewing a cloud so thick it turned the notch into milk. The first trackers hit the cloud blind, jaws wide. They screamed high and horrible. Riders swore, coughed, fired wild. Bolts smashed rock far wide of the group. "Left," Ethan snapped. "Slide." He shoved his weight into the scoria slope left of the basin and let his feet go. He skied rock like snow, panels scraping behind as improvised sleds. The line copied him by feel and fear. Sierra kept a hand on a wounded man's collar and rode him like a shield, eyes narrowed to slits. Cade yelled once, deep and delighted despite everything, as the whole group skidded 10 meters in one rush and crashed behind a jag of rock. Up, Ethan hissed, "Go now." They ran low under a lip of stone into a throat of shadow. The wind cut, the drums faded, the floodlights couldn't reach. The earth's heat pressed closer. "This way," Lyra said, voice low. She stood at a seam in the wall, one hand flat on black rock. "Shadow spiral, lava tube steep, but it breathes. The breaths are hot and timed. We go between them or burn." Ethan put his ear to the seam. For a moment he heard only his hammering heart and the far horns. Then he felt it, the mountain exhaling in a slow, hot gust through hairline cracks. The breeze faded, silence, then another hot breath. "How long?" he asked. 27 breaths between," Lyra said, eyes half closed. "It will shorten when we enter." "Then we time it," Ethan said. He turned to the people, who watched him now with something that wasn't quite fear. "We go when I say go. If I say stop, you freeze, even if your foot is midair. If you can't see, hold the person in front of you. If you can't walk, you tell me and I'll find you a back." He looked at Lena. "You stay at my belt." She nodded hard. "I will." Ethan slid the shard of metal into the seam at an angle and pried. The rock split. Not stone, glassy, crust over a hollow. He shoved a panel edge in and levered. The seam widened with a brittle snap and heat washed out like an oven door opening. "Now," Lyra said. They slipped into the tube. It was narrow at first, 2 bodies wide, ceiling low, floor uneven as a frozen river. The walls were smooth, rippled like wax that had cooled mid-drip. The air smelled of old ash and iron. Ethan counted under his breath. 20, 21, 22. Wind surged hot enough to sting exposed skin. He pressed them all to the wall and spread his panel across the group's heads like a roof. The breath roared past, tugged at hair and sleeves, then faded. "Go," he said, voice calm. "Nice and easy." They went between breaths. Stop, cover, gust, go. Some cried quietly, most didn't. Lyra moved along the flank, fingers brushing rock, lips parted as if she were listening to a song deeper than sound. They were 2 breaths into the tube when Lena's brother whimpered. Ethan glanced down. A small red spark blinked under the boy's ear, just behind the jaw. Ethan's stomach turned to ice. He lifted the hair. A pellet no bigger than a pea sat in a pocket of skin. It blinked, blinked, blinked. "Lyra," he breathed. Her eyes snapped there. "Beacon," she said, "or an egg." "Egg." "Pulse mine," she said, voice a shade tighter. "Triggered by proximity to a receiver. It will change from blink to solid when it arms." The light blinked faster. "Stop," Ethan said. The tube obeyed him like a single body. He handed Lena his belt. "Hold him still." "I can do it," Lena whispered fiercely, arms already around the boy. Ethan wiped his shard clean on his shirt. "Sierra," he said, "I need cloth and something to bite." The medtech shoved a folded strip into the boy's mouth. "You do it fast," she said. Her voice didn't shake, and straight. Ethan met the child's terrified eyes. "Hey," he said softly, "what's your name?" Rory," the boy whispered around the cloth. "Rory, I'm Ethan," he said. "I'm going to take the bad thing out of your neck. It will hurt, and then it will be done. Think about a river, cold water, fish tickling your toes, ready." Rory squeezed his eyes shut and nodded. Lena pressed her forehead to his. Ethan pinched the skin, found the pellet's edge, and slid the shard in. Blood welled. Rory jerked. Sierra pinned his shoulders. Ethan kept the cut shallow and precise. He felt metal kiss the shard, hooked it, lifted. The pellet resisted, then popped free with a wet sound and fell into Ethan's palm. Its light went solid red. Ethan didn't think. He jammed the pellet into a fungus dome he'd tucked under his arm earlier, the same one he'd carried from the basin as a just-in-case. He shoved the dome into a crack in the wall and threw his body across Rory and Lena. The pellet coughed, the dome burst. A muffled thump shook the tube and a burst of hot spore dust blasted across Ethan's back. The panel above rang like a bell. Silence, then breath. Then a ragged laugh from Cade, too loud, too relieved. It broke the fears back. Rory sobbed once and clung to his sister. Sierra pressed a rag to the cut. "You did well," she told the boy. "Very well." Ethan wiped spore off his face, heart slamming. He looked at Lyra. She looked back with something new in her eyes, not just respect. A warmth that wasn't heat. "You could have thrown it away," she said, very quiet. "And risk it rolling back under someone's boot," he said. "No." The tube breathed again. "Go," Lyra said. They went deeper. The tube widened, then narrowed, then opened into a long, sloping spiral, the shadow spiral Lyra had named. It wound down and around a central shaft like the inside of a shell. The air was hotter here, but cleaner. And on the inner wall, half hidden by mineral glaze, someone had carved a set of angular signs. Lyra stopped walking. Her fingers hovered above the glyphs. She did not touch them. Her breathing changed. "Zarathi script," she whispered. "Old, pre-war house marks and a map." "What does it say?" Ethan asked. She closed her eyes. "Under Ford," she said. "We are near a maintenance sanctuary, a heart chamber. My people built the heat runners through this mountain long before the Korvathi claimed it as theirs." "Can you open it?" Lyra tilted her head as if listening to something Ethan couldn't hear. "If it still lives." Behind them, distant through stone, came the muted thump of charges and the grind of cutters biting rock. Rill was digging. The hunters were finding the seam they had used. "We don't have long," Ethan said. Lyra placed her palm flat against the glyphs. Her posture changed, shoulders lowering, chin dipping slightly, not in submission but in alignment like a musician finding a note inside a cello. She hummed. The sound was almost nothing at first, just a breath colored by tone. The wall hummed back, a faint sympathetic vibration like glass singing. She changed the note. The wall changed with her. The hum rose and fell, split into harmonics, knit back together. The glyphs dimly glowed, then brighter, lines filling with dull blue light like water seeping into a dry riverbed. Stone slid, not out or in but aside, rippling like heavy curtains pushed by unseen hands. A narrow door opened, revealing dark beyond dark, and a breath of air came out that smelled like old metal and something sweet Ethan couldn't name. "Inside," Lyra said. They filed through, panel shields scraping. Ethan counted heads as they passed, 17, 19, 23. When he stepped in with the last pair, the door sealed without a seam, and the mountains outside noises died as if cut with a knife. The sanctuary woke. Lights pulsed in the ceiling, cool, soft, almost like starlight trapped in honey. The floor was smooth metal inset with lines of tiny hexes, each glowing faintly. The room widened into an oval chamber ringed by tall forms shrouded in dust and cobwebbed mineral. Consoles rose from the floor like growths, their surfaces awakening blue as Lyra walked past. Ethan stared. He had built systems and crawled engines in ships older than his parents. He had never seen anything like this. Cade let out a low whistle. "This a temple?" "No," Lyra said. "A workshop, a refuge, a memory." She moved to the central console and laid both hands on it. The blue light under her palms deepened. A tone thrummed through the floor, through Ethan's boots, through his bones. A map lifted in the air, lines of blue and red and white sketching the mountains insides, tubes like veins, vents like lungs, chambers like hearts. Tiny red points crawled down one side like ants. "Hunters," Ethan said. Lyra's jaw tightened. "They have breached the outer spiral, 3 groups, 2 above, 1 below." "Below," Ethan frowned. "How?" A mechanical chirp cut him off. Not from the door, from the room itself, from the tall shapes around the walls as their dust coats cracked and fell away like old bark. They were pods, dozens of them, tall, almond-shaped, each with a window of clouded crystal. Lights traveled down their seams. Locks clicked that had not moved in a lifetime. "Lyra," Ethan said, voice small in the sudden vastness. "What is this?" Her golden eyes were fixed on the nearest window. "Stasis," she whispered. "Cold sleep." The fogged crystal cleared like breath wiped from a mirror. A face looked back. Not human, not Corvathi. Silver skin, high cheekbones, closed eyes. A faint rise and fall at the throat as cold air turned to warm. Lyra's lips parted. The tone under their feet changed, richer, layered, almost like a voice learning to speak after years of silence. A calm voice filled the chamber, not from speakers but from everywhere at once. It spoke in Zarathi first, liquid and fast, then shifted, searching, until the words found trade tongue, careful and perfect. "Welcome home, Lyra of House Sale," it said. "Authorization accepted. Underforged Sanctuary 7 is awake. Warden profile detected above. Siege protocol engaged." The pod's panels slid back. Pale hands stirred within, eyes opened like dawn. Ethan stared from the waking Zarathi to Lyra. She looked suddenly very young and very old. Behind them, deep in the sealed door, cutters screamed and rock dust sifted from a seam that should not have had a seam. Rill's voice, distant even through stone, drifted down like a poisoned prayer. "Run, human," he murmured, amused. "Or wait, I'm coming to collect my debt." The sanctuary lights flared as something vast under the mountain turned and looked at them. And from the nearest pod, a Zarathi woman opened her eyes, fixed on Lyra, and whispered with cracked lips. "Daughter." The word hung in the chamber like a dropped blade. "Daughter." Lyra flinched as though struck. Her golden eyes widened, fixed on the silver-skinned woman who now sat up in the stasis pod. The figure's face was lined by years of sleep, but unmistakably strong, regal in its sharpness. Her hair fell in pale strands that shimmered under the blue glow of the sanctuary's light. "Impossible," Lyra whispered. Her voice cracked, the first sound of uncertainty Ethan had ever heard from her. "They said all of House Sale was ash." The woman, taller even than Lyra, her presence commanding despite her frailty, slid her legs out of the pod. She swayed, but her eyes never left Lyra. "We built sanctuaries," she said, her voice low and raw. "Not all of us burned." Ethan stepped closer, wary. More pods hissed open, more Zarathi blinking awake, their silver skin ghostly under the glow. Some gasped at the heat, others whispered words in their old tongue, testing voices stiff with disuse. The room thrummed again. The voice of the Underforged returned, steady and calm. "Stasis failure projected in 214 cycles. Awakening complete. Welcome back, artisans of Zarathi. External breach detected. Hostile signatures, Corvathi Hunters, Warden Authority 28. Siege countermeasures dormant. Awaiting command input." Ethan's blood chilled. "They'll be through the wall in minutes." Lyra's mother, there was no mistaking it, looked past Ethan to the glowing map. Her expression hardened as the red dots crawled deeper down the spiral. "The Corvathi hunt us even in our graves," she murmured. Then more sharply, "You human, why are you here?" Ethan met her gaze squarely. "Because your daughter saved me, and I won't leave her to die." The woman studied him for a long, quiet moment. Then she turned to Lyra. "This one speaks like his blood runs too fast. Why do you trust him?" Lyra's eyes never left her mother. Because when others saw a slave, he saw a person. The words silenced the chamber. Even the newly awakened Zarathi stared. The cutters shrieked against the wall again. A crack opened, dust raining down. The Corvathi were close. Ethan grabbed a panel from one of the makeshift shields and slammed it against the growing fracture. "We need defenses. Now, this place has power. Can we use it?" The Underforge answered. "Siege countermeasures require command confirmation." Lyra's mother raised her chin. "Authorization, Sale Prime." A tremor shook the floor. From hidden recesses, shapes unfolded, turrets of crystalline alloy dormant for centuries, now crackling with caged lightning. The air thickened with the ozone tang of power. The hunters outside bellowed. Their boots thundered against the door. Ethan's pulse hammered. He turned to the survivors, the ragged humans clustered near the wall, holding their scavenged shields and bars. Their faces were pale, terrified. Children huddled close to mothers. Cade stood tall, panel shield braced like a tower, Sierra at his side with blood-stained cloths tied to her hands. "They're coming," Ethan said, voice rough but strong. "And we're not prey anymore, not here. This is our ground, this is their mistake." He jabbed a finger at the humans, then at the Zarathi rising shaky from their pods. "You hold the line with us. You're weak from sleep, but your minds are. Show us what these machines can do. Help us stand." The Zarathi looked at Lyra's mother. She inclined her head once. "Fight." The chamber came alive. Zarathi fingers flew across consoles, waking systems Ethan couldn't comprehend. The turrets aligned with eerie precision, their crystal barrels humming. The floor itself shifted, plates sliding aside to reveal channels of molten energy that coursed like veins, ready to surge. Ethan moved among the humans, checking grips, steadying hands. He tore cloth from his shirt to pad a child's shoulders beneath a panel shield. He pressed Sierra's hand firm around a capacitor flash and met her eyes until her fear steadied. The wall split, heat and dust blasted inward. The first Corvathi shoved through, tusks gleaming, rifles spitting light. "Shields," Ethan roared. Cade and two others locked their panels together, bolts sparking and ricocheting. Behind them, slingers hurled flash bursts. The chamber flared white, hunters howled, blinded. "Now," Lyra's mother shouted. The turrets sang. Lightning speared across the chamber, hammering the first wave of hunters. Armor smoked, bodies convulsed. The smell of scorched scales filled the air. But more poured in, hulking brutes with war howls, trackers snapping and clawing behind them. Plasma bolts ripped across the chamber, one searing the floor inches from Lena's brother. He screamed, ducking into Ethan's chest. Ethan shoved him back behind a shield and ripped a bar from a cage. The old reflex surged up, the raw, furious will not to yield. He charged. The first hunter raised his rifle. Ethan slammed the bar into the creature's tusks, twisted, drove forward with a grunt. The rifle clattered away. He ducked a swipe, rammed the bar into the beast's throat. The hunter gagged and went down. Ethan yanked the rifle up. "I've got one," he shouted, tossing it to Cade. Cade caught it, grinned like a wolf, and opened fire. The chamber became chaos. Lightning, fire, screams, stone cracking under boots. Humans fought beside Zarathi, who barely remembered how to stand but still directed ancient machines with steady hands. Lyra moved through it all like a storm, silent, precise, cutting a hunter's harness free with a shard and turning its own beast against it. But above it all, Rill's voice poured from the speakers, calm, amused. "You're clever, Ethan, always were. But this is only one chamber. The peak is mine, and nothing you wake can stop that. You'll burn like everything else." Ethan slammed his bar into another hunter's knee, sending it sprawling. He spat blood and shouted up at the ceiling. "Then come down here yourself, coward." Silence just long enough to sting, then Rill's voice chuckled. "Soon." The breach widened, more shadows pressed at the edge. And then from the far side of the chamber, one of the Zarathi consoles flared red. A woman cried out in their tongue. Lyra spun to the panel, eyes wide. "What is it?" Ethan demanded. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight. "The Underforge has woken more than turrets," she said. "It has called to the mountain's heart." The floor shook, harder this time. Dust fell in veils from the ceiling. A low, grinding roar built from the depths below, deeper than thunder. Ethan staggered. "What did it call?" Lyra's mother answered, her voice heavy as stone. "The Forge Beast," she said. "What we sealed when we abandoned this place. It is awake." The ground cracked, heat surged. And from beneath the chamber floor, something vast stirred, something alive. The floor split like a wound. Molten light poured through widening cracks, casting the chamber in hues of gold and blood. Stone plates heaved, tearing apart consoles and scattering terrified humans across the floor. From the depths below, a roar rose, deep, metallic, endless. It wasn't the sound of a throat. It was the sound of a furnace exhaling after centuries. The Forge Beast emerged. It rose like a titan built of fire and iron, its body a fusion of living stone and machinery. Plates of obsidian shifted like armor. Veins of molten metal pulsed under its hide, glowing brighter with every breath. Its head was a crown of jagged horns, eyes burning with the color of molten steel. Each step shook the chamber as if the mountain itself were moving. The Corvathi hunters froze mid-charge. Even their trackers whimpered, tails curling. One hunter dropped his weapon, stumbling back toward the breach. Ethan's mouth went dry. What in all the stars? Lyra's mother stood tall despite her frailty, voice trembling with awe. "The Forge Beast, born of our ancestors' hubris, a guardian and a curse." "Guardian," Ethan barked. "That thing looks like it eats guardians for breakfast." The beast roared again and lightning leapt from its throat, tearing across the chamber. A turret exploded in blue shards. The hunters scattered. A bolt scorched stone 3 feet from Ethan's head, showering him with sparks. "It doesn't know friend from foe," he shouted. Lyra's eyes blazed with sudden realization. It answers only to harmony, to voice. You mean singing? Ethan asked, incredulous. Not singing, resonance. She stepped forward, chest rising as if she were about to shout into a storm. Lyra, wait, Ethan reached, but she was already moving toward the beast. The forge beast's massive head swung down, eyes locking onto her silver form. It snarled, molten saliva spitting from jaws big enough to swallow her whole. Lyra raised her arms and let out a note. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even human. It was a sound that vibrated through the bones, low and pure. The beast froze, its head cocking slightly as if listening. The glow in its chest dimmed a fraction. But then a Korvathi horn blared. The hunters, realizing the humans were frozen in awe, charged again. Plasma bolts streaked the air, striking a Zarathi just freed from stasis. She screamed and fell, blood black against silver skin. Ethan snapped out of it, shields now. Cade raised his rifle, Sierra dragged the wounded to cover, Lena shoved her brother behind a panel. Ethan grabbed his bar and charged into the hunters, rage and survival roaring together. He slammed into the first, twisting its rifle away, then used the same bar to crack its jaw with a crunch. The forge beast growled, its focus torn between Lyra's note and the chaos erupting below. It raised one clawed arm, molten lines flaring. Lyra, Ethan shouted, it's about to. Hold them back, she cried, her note never breaking. I can reach it. The beast struck. A molten claw smashed down, not on Lyra but on the breach where hunters poured in. The impact obliterated a dozen Korvathi, spraying stone and flesh alike. The chamber shook with shockwaves. Screams echoed as survivors scrambled, their courage shattered. The forge beast turned, bellowing fire across the chamber. Hunters burned where they stood, scales cracking. Humans ducked behind panels, heat washing over them like an oven door kicked open. Lyra's note wavered, then shifted pitch. The beast stilled again, like a monster caught between rage and obedience. Its molten eyes flicked back to her. Ethan staggered beside her, chest heaving. You're telling me you can control it. Her face glistened with sweat. Not control, guide. It remembers Zarathi voices. I am Sail, it listens. Ethan's heart hammered. Then guide it to crush Rill before he kills us all. As if summoned, Rill's voice boomed from above, calm and cutting through the chaos. Magnificent, he said. You've woken the mountain's corpse. I wondered if the old tales were true. His ship lowered, floodlights blinding. But all corpses rot, even that one. I'll gut your beast and I'll take the secret from its ashes. Ethan spat on the stone. He always talks too much. The forge beast snarled at the ship, molten eyes narrowing. Its chest glowed, heat building until the air shimmered. Rill's ship unleashed a barrage. Plasma beams cut through the storm, smashing into the beast's chest and shoulders. Stone and molten metal flew. The beast roared in pain, staggering. The humans cowered, the Zarathi cried out. No, Lyra's note rose higher, desperate. The beast's molten lines pulsed erratically. Stay with me, stay. It thrashed, smashing a turret, sending sparks flying. A boulder-sized chunk of stone crashed down inches from Ethan's head. He scrambled to his feet, eyes darting. They couldn't just watch, they had to fight back. Power, Ethan shouted to Lyra's mother. Can we give the turrets more power? She shook her head grimly. Not enough, the forge beast draws everything. Then we give it more to fight with, Ethan said, brain racing. He ripped the scorched capacitor from his pocket, shoved it against a glowing fissure in the floor, and winced as the crystal inside flared. Sparks burst. The floor lines glowed brighter. The beast jerked, as if fed strength. Its chest burned hotter, molten light pooling like a second sun. Ethan grinned despite the heat blistering his skin. That's it, feed the damned thing. Lyra's mother shouted orders to the waking Zarathi. They tore panels from consoles, jammed them into glowing channels, redirected power. Blue light raced across the floor into the beast's chest. The forge beast bellowed and unleashed a beam of molten fire. It slammed into Rill's ship, tearing a hole across its side. Metal screamed, smoke poured. The ship veered, sparks trailing from its engines. For the first time, Rill's voice lost its calm veneer. Kill it, kill them all. More hunters poured in desperate, screaming war cries. The chamber became hellfire, lightning, plasma, molten fury, steel bars clashing against tusks. Humans fought shoulder to shoulder with Zarathi, fear turning into something sharper. Survival, rage, hope. Ethan drove his bar through a hunter's ribs and wrenched it free, blood steaming on the metal. He panted, eyes scanning. "We can't hold this forever." Lyra's note broke into a harsh gasp. "Then we end it now." The forge beast turned, eyes locking on her again. She lifted both arms, voice raw. "Hear me, I am Sail. This is our forge, our fire. Burn them all." The beast roared and raised both claws, molten chest burning like a star. The chamber lit as though the sun had been born underground. Hunters screamed, humans screamed. The mountain itself shook. And then from the smoke above, Rill's ship plunged back into view, damaged, burning, but alive. Its belly opened, and from its hold, something vast and black dropped like a predator leaping. A machine, a war machine the size of a house, armed with plasma claws and teeth of serrated steel. It landed in the chamber with a crash, stone cracking under its weight. Rill's voice followed, sharp as a knife. "You think your beast is ancient power? I've built my own." The war machine raised its head and roared, a sound crafted to drown flesh and stone alike. Ethan staggered back, sweat pouring, lungs burning, eyes wide. "Lyra," he whispered, "we've got two monsters now." The chamber had become a battlefield between gods. The forge beast, molten chest burning like a star, squared off against Rill's war machine, a hulking monster of steel and plasma. The mountain shuddered beneath their roars. Lightning cracked from the beast's throat, plasma claws blazed from the machine's arms. The clash of their strikes made the world quake. Humans and Zarathi scattered, pressed against the chamber walls, shields trembling under the shockwaves. Children cried. The newly awakened Zarathi staggered, too weak to stand against the tremors. In the middle of it all stood Ethan, bar clenched in his blood-slick hands, lungs heaving, mind racing. Two monsters, one old as legend, one built by a traitor. Both could kill us as easily as breathe. Rill's voice poured from the machine's external speakers, harsh and triumphant. "Do you see it, Ethan? Flesh rots, stone cracks, but human will forge this. Not your compassion, not your mercy. Will, ruthless, perfect will, my will." The war machine lunged. Its claws slashed at the forge beast, gouging molten streaks from its side. The beast screamed, fire blasting wide, scorching the chamber and sending shards of crystal raining down. A bolt caught a human shield panel, melting it to slag. Cade cursed, dragging two captives back behind the wreckage. Ethan's head pounded. He turned to Lyra. She was on her knees, golden eyes squeezed shut, voice trembling in resonance. The beast's molten glow flickered in time with her tone. "It listens," she gasped. "But it falters, it is rage and fire. Without harmony it destroys all." Ethan dropped beside her, gripping her shoulders. "Then give it harmony, anchor it. You said it remembers Zarathi voices. Let it hear more than rage." Lyra's mother stepped forward, pale and regal despite her weakness. She pressed one hand to her daughter's shoulder, the other over her own chest. Her voice joined Lyra's, a deeper tone, cracked by age but strong. Another Zarathi staggered from her pod, then another, adding their voices. The chamber filled with a low, woven chorus, vibrating the air, steadying the forge beast's molten heart. Its eyes cleared, the molten light steadied. It turned back to the war machine, not a beast of blind fury now, but a guardian with purpose. Rill's voice cut like acid. "Sing all you want, relics. This is science, not song." The machine's chest opened, revealing a core of blinding plasma. Ethan knew that glow. He'd kept reactors alive long enough to recognize overload. "Lyra," he shouted over the roar, "it's priming a reactor burst." Her eyes widened. "If it unleashes that, the chamber, everyone." "We won't survive," Ethan finished grimly. The forge beast roared, molten jaws opening, but the machine struck first. A plasma beam lanced across the chamber, hammering the beast backward. Stone cracked under its weight. Humans screamed, the roof split, raining fire. Ethan's heart thundered, think like an engineer. He grabbed Lyra's hand. "We can't outfight that machine, but we can outsmart it." "How?" she demanded, breath ragged. He looked at the glowing channels carved into the floor, the ancient veins feeding power into the forge beast. His mind snapped pieces together, conduits, resonance, overload. "We feed the mountain itself," he said. "Overload the conduits, turn this whole chamber into one giant resonator." Lyra's mother paled. "You would collapse the underforge, everything." "Better rubble than a slaughterhouse," Ethan snapped. Lyra stared at him, golden eyes burning. Then she nodded once. "Show me." They moved fast. Ethan ripped a panel from a broken console, exposing humming crystals. He jammed his shard into the veins, sparks spitting. Lyra knelt beside him, her burned wrists glowing faintly as she pressed both palms to the conduit. The resonance of her voice changed, higher, sharper, aligning with the pulse of the forge. The channels flared. Blue light raced across the floor, brighter, hotter, until the whole chamber glowed like the inside of a star. The forge beast staggered to its feet, molten veins blazing. It bellowed, a sound of rage turned into command, and fire poured from its chest in a stream so bright it blinded. The beam slammed into Rill's war machine just as its reactor burst reached peak. For one frozen instant, both titans locked in a column of fire and plasma. The air screamed. Then the world detonated. The shockwave tore through the chamber, ripping consoles, shattering crystals, blowing humans and Zarathi alike to the ground. Ethan hit stone hard, air blasted from his lungs. He clutched Lena's brother with one arm, shielding him with his own body. Heat seared, dust choked. When the roar finally died, silence rushed in. Ethan forced his eyes open. The war machine was gone, a twisted carcass of blackened steel, slag dripping into molten cracks. The forge beast stood swaying, molten lines dimming, steam rising from deep wounds. It turned its head once toward Lyra, eyes flickering with something almost gentle. Then it groaned, sank to its knees, and collapsed. Its body cracked apart, cooling into stone. The mountain sighed, the light in the veins dimmed. Lyra stumbled forward, hand outstretched, but stopped just short of the beast's cooling body. Her voice broke into a whisper. "It chose to die with us." "No," Ethan rasped, staggering to his feet. "It chose to save us." Silence held, broken only by coughing, by the soft cries of survivors. The hunters were dead or fled, their bodies scattered across molten stone. And then Rill's voice came again, weaker but still alive. From the wreckage of the machine, a figure dragged itself free, armor blackened, one arm ruined, face burned but still recognizable. Rill. He staggered upright, eyes wild, voice bitter. "You think this is victory? You've destroyed everything. You've killed your own hope. What will you build from ashes?" Ethan limped toward him, bar dragging. Every muscle screamed, but his voice was steady. "Hope is what humans build from, always has been." Rill sneered, lifting a scorched pistol. "Then die with it." The shot never came. A bolt of lightning lanced from a surviving turret, frying the pistol from his hand. Lyra's mother stood at the console, her eyes hard as steel. Rill froze, then laughed, broken and bitter. "You'll never stop the hunts. Crimson Peak belongs to the Corvathi, to me." Ethan raised his bar. "Not anymore." He swung, the steel cracked against Rill's skull with a sickening thud. The traitor crumpled to the stone, unmoving. Silence, real silence this time. Ethan let the bar fall from his hand. His knees nearly gave, but Lyra caught his arm, steadying him. Her golden eyes searched his face, softer now, warmer. "You chose to fight even when the world was fire." He gave a crooked smile, lips split and bloody. "That's what humans do." All around them, survivors began to rise. Humans leaning on Zarathi. Zarathi lifting wounded humans, no longer prey, no longer slaves, together. Lyra's mother's voice carried across the chamber. "The hunt is broken. The warden is fallen. From these ashes we will forge something new." Ethan looked at the cooling husk of the forge beast, at the broken war machine, at the ragged survivors clutching each other in the glow of a dying forge. He thought of Rill's words, "What will you build from ashes?" He clenched his fists, every scar, every blister burning with resolve. "Everything," he whispered. Epilogue. Days later, as the survivors marched down Crimson Peak, the mountain still smoked behind them. They had no ships, no weapons beyond scavenged rifles, no supplies but what they carried. But they had each other, humans and Zarathi, scarred, hungry, alive. And leading them down the broken path, shoulder to shoulder, were Ethan and Lyra. The hunt of Crimson Peak was over. But the war for what came next had only begun.